My name is Dr. Chris Jenkins, and I am the CEO of the Orianne Society and the host of the Snake Talk podcast, the podcast where you learn about nature's most feared, maligned, and persecuted animals. I invite you to listen to this conversation, and maybe you'll find that what you perceive as fear is actually rooted in a deep fascination. Welcome to the Snake Talk podcast. We have a returning guest today, Dr. Emily Taylor. If you have not heard it, shut this off right now and go back and listen to episode 23. And she was also featured in our episode where we highlighted our top snake stories of all times, and hers was definitely one of the tops. So I would encourage you to go back and listen to that episode. But I want to bring Emily back on because there's kind of a couple interesting things that has been happening in her world with snakes, and I wanted to highlight both of those. And one being a new book that she's put out on snakes in California. And the other one is some of her latest research. So we're going to talk about the book first, but everybody needs to stay tuned because I think this is going to be an interesting discussion dealing with using videography and similar techniques to study snakes. So welcome back to the podcast, Emily. How are you today?
I am wonderful. Thanks so much for having me, Chris. How are you?
I am doing good. Doing very well. Thank you. So we won't, if people are really interested in all your background and how you ended up where you are today, they can go back and listen to that episode 23. I won't make you go through all, where you went to school and on. But why don't you just kind of go ahead and give the audience, if they haven't listened to that, give them just kind of the high level introduction to kind of who you are and what you do.
That sounds perfect. So I'm a biology professor at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, California. And I've been here for almost 20 years. And before that, I got my PhD at Arizona State University. And before that, bachelor's at UC Berkeley. And it was at Berkeley where I started studying snakes. And so I've been studying rattlesnakes for about 25 years. I also do work with lizard physiology, but rattlesnakes are where my passion and heart lie. And I've become progressively more obsessed with human-wildlife conflict as it pertains with rattlesnakes, rattlesnake public relations, and rattlesnake social behavior, really in recent years. So this has been a change from my past as a, primarily a reptile physiologist. And I still do that as my bread and butter. But today we're here to talk about some of the other things I do for fun. Because this is what we do for fun. Right? It's our hobbies is to do more research.
And don't you even have like a side hustle? You have like a company that does rattlesnake related work in terms of fencing and some other things. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, I do. In 2019, so we're coming up on our 5-year anniversary here, I started a company called Central Coast Snake Services that is basically organized around reducing and trying to solve human-wildlife conflict with rattlesnakes here on the California Central Coast and also in California a little more broadly. It's hard to call it a side hustle because it's funny. Some people say it's a nonprofit, and I'm like, no, it's just not a profitable business. It's like we do most everything for free. Luckily, I have a good job, so I can do all this for free. So we do free relocations of rattlesnakes from people's yards, free outreach events, free kids' birthday parties, all those types of things. And we do a few other paid things like snake safety classes, et cetera, and snake fencing on a pretty small scale out here in rural California where I am.
Mm-hmm. Well, all good things. Let's dive in and talk a little bit about this book. So first of all, what's the title?
The book is called California Snakes and How to Find Them, which might sound familiar to any of you who are Potterverse fans because it's a play on fantastic beasts and where to find them. Because like I say in the book, snakes are the most fantastic beasts of all. So it's about field herping. Yes, it's true. It's a field herping book. So it's not really a field guide. It does have entries for each snake, but it's not super technical. There's a really good field guide coming out in 2025 by Hansen and Shed on herps of California. And so this isn't that. It's got amazing photography, and none of it by me. It's just the writing by me. And but what it is a bunch of stories about these snakes, things I've learned by watching them, and information and techniques on how to find them. Because I don't know about you, Chris, but I've noticed that it's really hard for new people to get into the field of field herping because there's some gatekeeping in there, right? People don't want to tell people what to do because of very real fears that if you tell someone where to go, they're going to go out and ruin your site, right? They're going to ruin your flipping boards, or they're going to tell someone else and someone's going to kill the snakes or that sort of thing. And people have to learn it on their own. But there is a good way to try to teach people how to learn it on their own. So that's what I try to do in this book.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you might just, even with well-meaning people, you might just end up with more people in the woods in your spot. So yeah, there is kind of this gatekeeping, as you call it. And, a lot of people can be pretty secretive, and I think rightfully so, because there's it could be a lot of nefarious things that happen if some good sites, for example, got out. So, well, what was, so you mentioned you've been working in California for over 20 years on snakes, and so what was it that prompted you to put this book together? Kind of what was the origin idea, if you will? What kind of kicked it all off?
There was a couple things. There was a Facebook group that I'm part of called California Field Herping, where you have a bunch of snake experts like me who are on there and a bunch of other people posting cool photos, really. And then you have new people joining all the time, asking questions. How do I learn? Where do I go? And me really seeing that there isn't really a good resource out there. That combined with the fact that there isn't a good up-to-date book on the snakes of California specifically. And especially there isn't one that has like stories. I was really inspired, probably like you were as a kid, by the book Snakes and Snake Hunting. And not trying to put myself on par with him, but it's a little bit like that, where people like to read these stories, especially young people. So I think the book is geared towards really anyone, partly because of the beautiful photos and the fun stories. But I think it's especially geared towards young people and people who are new to the field of field herping for snakes, because they can read about some of the cool things that I've gotten to see. The last thing, Chris, that really inspired me was this concept of how much we handle snakes. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying I am not the kind of person that says you should never pick up a snake, because I pick up snakes all the time, whether for my research or for fun. We do. And I firmly believe that holding a snake in your hand is part of what makes us excited as herpers, right? Mm-hmm. However, there's a bit much of that sometimes going on. And I think some people don't understand how much it can stress the animal or the habitat by catching it. But also for me, there was another part that no one ever mentioned, which is if we just watch them, you see really cool stuff that you would miss if you picked them up right away. So I tell the story in the book, for example, of my students were about to descend upon this gopher snake that was crossing our campground in Central California. And I said, wait. He's on a mission. Let's watch him. This gopher snake went right over to a big oak tree, climbed right up, started getting dive bombed by great horned owl. There was a pair that was nesting up there. He is impervious to it, went right up there and ate the two chicks and came back down with two big lumps inside of him. So we got to really see that whole thing unfold, where if we caught him, he wouldn't have done that, right? So I'm a big proponent for really, snake watching. And of course, catching snakes when we feel like it and when it warrants, but also not always catching them.
Yeah, 90-something% of field herpers probably would have immediately caught that snake and never observed that really cool ecological interaction. Yeah, I obviously catch snakes as well, even not just for work, but if I'm out or recreationally looking for them, I do catch them and handle them. But more so, I end up watching them these days, especially here in the Southern Appalachians with timber rattlesnakes. And, I don't even, first of all, I'm going oftentimes to gestation sites. So, these are females you don't want to be handling, but, even animals that are about to shed or other animals we might find that I would possibly handle. I don't even use, unless I need to for some reason. I don't bring a snake hook. I bring binoculars, and actually, I'll kind of like sneak up on the, on the site, and I'll be using binoculars and like from a distance, really looking for the snakes and moving in real slow, and I find that pretty rewarding. So
I agree entirely. So that was kind of the point, was to tell stories about that and encourage people to do it too.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember Harry Green, who was on recently for our 100th episode. I remember him talking about that a long time ago. Actually, with timber rattlesnakes up in New York, I believe, and the idea of using binoculars, and just that always stuck with me. So if we were to, you talked about stories, but you also mentioned that it's not a field guide, but it does kind of outline the various species in the state. So if we were to kind of open the table of contents, if you will, like how is the book structured, and then kind of why did you end up going with that structure?
Yeah, so the beginning has a bunch of front matter, which talks about things like what are snakes, because remember, this book is, even though snake experts are gonna like it because of the amazing photography and some of the fun stories, it's really not for snake experts. It's for newbies, first and foremost. So I talk about, why California? Why is California such a great state for snakes? Talking about how it's such a big snake and it spans so many latitudes and has elevation changes. It has this large coastal area and what that means for snake diversity. We talk about rattlesnakes and the ethos of not killing rattlesnakes, and how to manage rattlesnakes and how to be safe in rattlesnake country, because whoa boy, California, every inch of it is covered in rattlesnakes, except for maybe some places that are covered in concrete. And there's right.
Yeah.
And additional
how many
sections
species
like that,
of
some things that might be
rattlesnakes are there in
mistaken.
California?
Okay, so no matter what I answer, someone's going to be irritated, because you know how it is where people say it's a subspecies per species. I define it as 7 species, and that's because I combine the western rattlesnake. I consider it one species. I don't actually really care if Northern Pacific, Southern Pacific, and Great Basin are species or subspecies. And I mentioned that in the book too. I talk about taxonomy and how it's an inexact science and how there's some argument there. But yeah, about 7.
Okay, great. And so sorry, I kind of cut you off there. Continue on with, just kind of talking about how you structure the book, and kind of why you came about with that structure. So.
Yeah, for sure. And then, so after the front matter, there's a species account for each species, and there's like an introductory story on each one, and then there's the snake's appearance and their natural history and where they live in general. So it's a little bit field guidey, but it's not like scale counts, right? And that type of level of detail. And then at the end, there's a fun feature that I liked, which is you might like to know. So I tell something like a really cool trivia story, something interesting about that species of snake. And then in each of these case studies, in each of these, little accounts, there's a kind of a face shot, like a close-up face shot. And then there's several in situ shots in habitat. So it's really important that the photography for me was showing the snakes in habitat, because this book is about how to find them. So I really wanted to represent that as well. Not just, snakes on a blank background, which is really appropriate for a field guide where you're really trying to look at those characters, but really what are the snakes doing in nature? And so the way I came up with that was I just tried to think, what would I want to do? What would I have wanted to do when I was getting into snakes, and what would I like to read? Or if I was going and visiting a state and I was going to their national park gift shop and I wanted to pick up a book on snakes, what would be the kind of things I would want to see? And those were the things that I thought would be appropriate. And I worked with the wonderful people at Heyday Books who are, they do a lot of California trade books. So I worked with them on the best methods for being able to, portray animals, portray organisms. And they agreed that style and that format was good. And so here we are now. And I should say, it takes a long time to get these books published. So it comes out on May 7th, which is really exciting. But since then, I've finished the follow-up book on lizards, which comes out next year. And I'm about halfway done with the third and final book on amphibians of California, which will come out the following year. So it's going to eventually be a 3-book set, which is pretty exciting.
You're busy. So, so then the stories you were talking about are kind of integrated into each of the species accounts then. So each species has a story. And these are stories from you, like personal experiences you've had with species or something along those lines.
Sometimes they are. Usually they are, because this was fun for me just to go through and be like, which of these snakes in California have I not had encounters with? Because there's a couple.
Yeah.
And in those cases, I talk sometimes about why I haven't had an encounter. Like a good example is the giant garter snake, which, as you might know, is an endangered species here in California. I've never seen a giant garter snake. And I talk in the book about how I've never seen one. You might never see one, and maybe you shouldn't. Maybe we should leave them alone, and here's why. Right? And then in contrast, I talk in the entry on western rattlesnakes, which is a snake that I've encountered thousands and thousands of, and I've had some really, unique and intimate encounters with because of radio telemetry and working with them so much. That's a particularly long species account because it was hard for me to decide which stories to tell. Yeah, so mostly my stories, and then sometimes some other people's stories, but really trying to make it personal and show people my journey in the hopes that other people will develop theirs. And that's kind of what we share online, right, on our social media. And
have you seen San Francisco garter snakes?
No, I have not seen them. And they are featured in there, of course, as the subspecies. But they're another example of one that I have never seen. I have seen Alameda whip snakes back in the day, but never a San Francisco garter snake. No. Yeah,
we did a whole episode on San Francisco garter snakes and giant garter snakes. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but with Brian Halstead with USGS. I don't know if you know him.
Yes. Yeah. I do know
anyways,
him, yeah.
So what other snakes haven't you seen? I'm trying to think what snakes might be hard to find in California. Are night snakes hard to find on the east side, or would you have them south as well?
Night snakes are not hard to find. I've seen lots of night snakes of both species. Night snakes are pretty easy to find. You just have to look under stuff. We see them also night driving in the desert quite a bit. I find them under landscaping cloth in people's yards or in people's houses. People call me about baby rattlesnakes in their houses. It's a night snake every time. They like to go into people's houses. I don't know why. No, there's a few that are. Go ahead.
I was going to say, do you have rubber boas in Eastern California? I'm trying to think the distribution.
We do. We have rubber boas in Northern California, and they kind of go, up along the coast, and then also, of course, over, towards your old stomping grounds in Idaho. And then, interesting rubber boa, speaking of stories, is they do get down to Southern California and some of the mountain ranges where they get a little bit more rare. And then right here in the California Central Coast where I live, along the coast, that was one of the most southernmost areas where they were known from, but there was no specimen down here. Montani de Oro State Park, which is a place that is right here by where I live, that area has 4 different records of rubber boas, but people had seen them, but we'd never gotten a sample. And so we finally got one, and it was a mountain biker had run over it, and so we were able to get the tissue sample for it. So they're here; they're just really rare. But
Gotcha.
I've seen them a lot up in Northern California, quite a bit more.
So I'm wondering, what other species then haven't you seen in California?
One of the species I haven't seen is the northwestern garter snake. It only occurs up in just the extreme northwestern part of California, and I just haven't gone up there to look for it. They're not particularly rare, but for anyone who's listening from the East Coast, that would be like me driving across 5 states to get to it. It's just really far away. So that's an example of one that I have not seen. I think that might be it. There's a couple species of snakes that supposedly occur in California, but haven't been seen for many years. I've never seen those, but no one else has either. So with snakes, I've seen most of them. With lizards, I've seen most, except for some of the introduced ones, and then I'm working on the amphibians now. That's been fun this year. So
great.
But snakes are my our right. Snakes are our thing. They're the ones that we've known for a long time.
So I asked you how many rattlesnakes there are in the state. How many snake species in total, given the way you define the species?
There's about 50 the way I defined it. So there's actually more than that. There's probably closer to 60. But in some cases, there's subspecies that could be considered species or not. And so around 50 is a kind of a nice round number.
Is that the top state? No. What would, you would rank close to the
Texas.
top? Texas. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's close to the top because of size, but Texas up more. Yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha.
I'm not sure if Arizona may have more as well.
Yeah, I was going to say those are the two states I would have, wondered about. But okay, great. So the book's coming out in May 7th. This will probably actually, when this drops, the book will probably be out. What are you kind of hoping? Obviously you're hoping to sell a lot of books, but what are you hoping that this book will do, for people, communities, field herpers, scientists, whatever it might be?
Yeah, a couple things. I hope that people who are interested in snakes can use it to learn more about snakes and to do it and to learn about also simultaneously about the ethics of snakes and snake hunting, and about being a good neighbor to snakes when we go out to look for them. That's one thing. The second thing is I will say that similar to everything I do, the book, and because California is so rattlesnake heavy, has a lot of information in it on how to safely and peacefully coexist with rattlesnakes. And I do hope that the book and some of the associated things, like I am doing a small book tour in May and June in California, people who come to those events have a chance to see what these snakes are doing, and this kind of bleeds into what we'll talk about next, which is the live streaming camera as well. And it really reverses, I hope, some of the damage that's done by irresponsible television and YouTube and media showing snakes and portraying them in ways that they aren't. So we try to do our best, you, me, all of us as scientists and storytellers, to right the wrongs that other people have done when it comes to snakes, and to contribute to people respecting these animals. If liking them, maybe, hopefully, but definitely respecting them.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. So if people are interested, and I would tell the audience that they should be, and they should go out and pick this book up, where can they find it? Where are they going to be able to purchase the book?
They can probably find it in California. It'll be widely available in, state park, national park bookstores, in regular bookstores, certainly online. If you're not in California, then it may be more easy to find them at online at your favorite bookstore. So there's bookstore.org, Powell's Books. People can buy it on Amazon. People can also buy it on my website if they want a signed copy shipped to them. And my website is centralcoastsnakeservices.com, and put a little /shop on the end of that. Maybe you can put it in the show notes. And that's the way to get a signed copy delivered right to your doorstep.
Yeah, great. We will we'll put some of those links in the show notes for folks so they can go right there and purchase it. So, well, great. Well, before we transition, is there anything else you wanted to say about the book before we leave that topic?
No, thanks. I think we've talked about it, and I hope people like it. And thank you so much for asking me about it, Chris.
Yeah, it's great to hear about it. Reptiles face many challenges, from habitat loss to climate change. As an example, turtles are the most threatened group of animals on the planet, with over 60% of species classified as endangered. The Orianne Society is working hard to secure a thriving future for these incredible animals. To engage in the critical work we're doing, explore our website at www.orianne.org. There you'll find in-depth insights into the science, conservation action, and communication initiatives we're undertaking. Visit us today. So now let's transition, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about kind of your recent research adventures. And you talked about live streaming, and I talked about videography and rattlesnakes. And so why don't you just kind of start in and kind of talk to us about what you've been doing, and we'll just kind of see where the conversation takes us from there.
Sounds good. I'll give you kind of the short version first, and then we can do follow-ups. So I have been heavily involved in the past 3 years in my probably most exciting research project to date, exciting to me at least, and I think to a lot of people out there because it's a community science project too. So people out there are involved. Anyone who wants to get involved can get involved. It's called Project Rattlecam, and it started out by having time-lapse cameras on a megaden of prairie rattlesnakes over in Colorado. So by megaden, I mean it has hundreds of snakes in it. We think over 1,000 even. So lots of rattlesnakes. Yeah, it was really cool. So I went out there with my colleague, Scott Boback, who started doing some data collection out there. And we, in a month, we marked 375 individual snakes. And we would go up there and there were still, most of them didn't have marked rattles. So a truly epic spot where those snakes hang out together. And we put cameras on them and then came back and got all these photos and realized how hard it was to analyze all those photos ourselves. So we did a community science project on the platform called Zooniverse, where it ended up being almost 6,500 people helped us to analyze those photos with things like how many snakes are there, what are the snakes doing, are they drinking water, are there predators eating the snakes? And it was really eye-opening because not only was it this mutualism because with people were helping us with our data, and then also we were helping show rattlesnakes to people and giving them a chance to be a scientist, but also it was popular online and people liked seeing rattlesnakes as they were. And we thought, this is really helping to kind of combat some of the BS that you see with rattlesnakes being all fierce, which they're not. They all know rattlesnakes are pretty mellow. And so that then gave rise to the past 3 years we've been doing a live streaming camera, because why should eagles and falcons have all the fun, with us watching the cameras that are on their nests? Why not put this on a snake hibernaculum? And so we did, and we've been doing it in California for the past 3 years at a small snake rookery, which of course many of your listeners will know that that's a place where it's a communal nest of rattlesnakes. Rattlesnake females get together, give birth, and take care of their babies. And we did it here locally because the technology is actually really difficult for doing a live streaming camera that's remote. Most of the live streaming cameras that are on birds are like on a building or are connected to power and Wi-Fi is the point. So doing that remotely proved very difficult, but I'm at an engineering university, luckily, so I had amazing resources. We did it locally to be able to troubleshoot it. And then now, very excitingly, by the time this podcast episode airs, so in the early May, we are going to have live for the first time the Megaden in Colorado on a live stream. And it's going to be 24 hours a day. We have this really fancy infrared camera to watch them at night as well, for when they're out at night in the middle of the summer. It streams live to YouTube so people can interact with us and ask us questions. This camera doesn't just sit there. It remotely pans, tilts, and zooms. So if someone who's on the YouTube chat says, oh, can you zoom in on that snake up in the top left? We can zoom in, again, remotely using our laptops wherever we are in the world. So it's just a crazy opportunity for science, for community science, and for outreach. I can definitely talk to you more about all those things. But isn't it cool? I can't wait for this live. I'm how excited I am. I cannot wait for this. I've been waiting for years to put a live stream in Colorado. I cannot wait.
Great. Well, let's back up a little bit. And so there's this amazing den in Colorado you're talking about. What's the setting, first of all? Not obviously, we don't want to say where it is, but I mean, is this out in the prairies? Is it a rock den? Is it some type of culvert, holes in the ground? Like, what's kind of the landscape and the micro settings that you're finding these big concentrations of snakes in?
Yeah, it's in the prairie in a high elevation setting. So this is in northern Colorado, and it's surrounded by prairie, by grazed grassland. It's on private ranch, and this is a volcanic peak. So there's a lot of fissures at the top of this peak that go down deep, so that the snakes can all go down below the frost line in the winter. And where we are at high elevation, it's under a lot of snow for at least 6 months of the year, sometimes 7 or 8. So really short active season for these snakes to come out. They come out and bask basically for all of May, just giant piles of males, females, babies. And then all the males and the non-pregnant females, they all take off for miles around. Typical for prairie rattlesnakes down to the prairie. They eat, they mate, they do their things down there. But the pregnant females stay behind at the hibernaculum and they bask. And then they have their babies and seem to cooperatively care for those babies for the first couple of weeks. And that's going to be one of the focal points
so
of
is
the Project Rattlecam.
I was just going to say, is the overwintering sites, are the snakes primarily in like one like portal, or are they kind of coming out from all over this this feature, just thinking about how you're gonna prioritize where you put your camera, kind of thing. So
yeah, it's one spot. There's a few crevices that they come out of, but they all bask in one area. So the camera is going to be able to have like a kind of a set home spot where it's really taking in all of it. It won't be able to see all the snakes because there's little oak trees. They could be back behind, and they could be behind rocks, and they can, some of them of course be underground too. But we'll be able to see in a snapshot who's where, what's happening at any given time. It'll be difficult to count them. Let me tell you right now, there's just piles of snakes. There's so many rattlesnakes. So, but our goal is to do really fun things, like as the season progresses, people who are watching online, they might recognize some of the snakes. So as you know, rattlesnakes have unique patterns on their back sometimes, so you can tell which one's which. And people are going to be able to, as soon as they have figured out for the first time how to actually tell that snake every day, they can name it. They get the honor of naming it for us, to adopt that snake. And so we have lots of plans for how to involve the people who are going to be watching this and who are helping us collect the data. But meanwhile, this is a research endeavor. So I have 2 of my graduate students are collecting their data for their master's theses on this live cam as well.
Okay, that's great. So you're moving towards putting this camera out, but you have been, you said, marking and photographing the snakes, and then, using those photographs to ID them. And you were doing it, with like citizen scientists helping out, as you talked about. And so how would you do that, just out of curiosity? Would you do like a kind of a standardized photo of the snake, or the snake in any position, or did you somehow get it, say into a tube or whatever it might be? How did you get those photos?
Well, there's a couple different ways. When we first started and we had the time-lapse cameras on actually like a different den right nearby, but snakes don't go back and forth. We had marked the snakes with unique 3-color codes on their rattles. And that was when we marked 375 of them. So we used, citizen scientists helped us to say which, is there a painted rattle in the picture? And then my students were able to go back and identify all, because again, I'm talking about tens of thousands of photos. So citizen scientists helped us with that. Then we went back and my students are working on these social network analyses now, saying which of these marked snakes are hanging out with each other. So that was from data we have from the time lapse. Moving forward now at the live streaming camera spot, we are not going anywhere near those snakes. This is completely hands off. No touching the snakes, no marking them. People will figure out who's who solely by their patterns, which is much more challenging, but it's going to be really fun too. And I think that we're not going to get all of them. I mean, of course we're not going to get all of them. There's so many. But I think once the pregnant females are there, there'll be certain individuals that we can follow. And we want to study their interactions. Like one of my students, Owen, is interested in social behavior. And so doing these social network analyses and looking at the concept of which snakes hang out with which other snakes and potentially why is really exciting.
And how many snakes do you estimate overwinter there? You said thousands.
Yeah, so there's 2 dens that are nearby each other. The one that we had the decent estimate from is the other one, not the one that the live stream's going to. And that one we think it's definitely at least 1,000 for sure. Our mark recapture, we only did it for 1 year. So it's probably closer to 1,500, somewhere in there. And then this other den that we're at is maybe a little bit smaller than that. So maybe 500 to 1,000. I don't know for sure because we're trying to be hands off there. It's just so many that it gets kind of difficult to count. But many hundreds. And in the summer, when it's just the pregnant females that are left behind, then you have many dozens of them. So lots. Compared to California, where we had, about 8 or so on the at any given time on the California live stream. So it's all just building up for the Colorado one.
Yeah. So you were saying that they come out and all the snakes are basking and for some time period, and then a lot of the snakes are leaving, but the gravid females, the ones that will give birth that year, are staying and using that area as a gestation site. So are they using the actual den opening? I mean, are they staying right in the same area where you're going to have the camera, or are they moving off and kind of selecting?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. It's amazing.
It's the same area. It's the same area right there. It is. And then the other den, the one that we've been studying for 4 years now, It's a little bit trickier. Some of the den openings are rookeries, and then there's other spots that are not dens, but the females move to that become rookeries in the summer. There's multiple small rookeries all over that hill. So there's no real rules. It's just I think it's determined by the relief of the actual peak. The one where the live streaming camera is going has just one small peak, one major opening complex, and all the snakes hang out right there because there's shade from the oak trees. It's south facing. It's just an ideal snake basking spot.
Yeah, you couldn't ask for more. Hundreds or thousands snakes and females that gestate right there. It's pretty amazing. So with this,
it's pretty cool.
With the painting of the rattles and these studies on kind of social networks in prairie rattlesnakes, you said you have some students working on this. I mean, any kind of interesting preliminary results or just kind of speculation based on anecdotes that you guys are seeing, but anything you can kind of tease or share with us on that?
Yeah, so definitely with the social behavior, it's anecdotal at this point, and that's because all of our DNA, we have DNA from all those 375 snakes, is all still being analyzed by our colleagues. So we can't tell you it yet. The holy grail is that our hypothesis is that the snakes that hang out together more are more closely related. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's a hypothesis. So we'll see. We have to wait on that. But we definitely, at the California den, which was small, we were able to see really interesting, just qualitative patterns of friendship in snakes, which I think is something that people don't talk about very often. There are certain individual snakes who would come out, these are pregnant females, and curl up together in the same postures every day. They always had to be touching. And then we would see these other females come out, and they would kind of come up and try to like touch them or curl up. And the body language of the other two was totally dismissive. It was very mean girls. It was very like, get away from us. And then they would kind of run the other ones off. And I thought that was so interesting. It's like, why is that? I don't know.
That's fun.
I know, I loved it. It's like drama, right? And then aside from the social behavior, we saw lots of other really cool stuff on the cameras, whether it was the live cam or the time-lapse cam. We got to see, I mean, you can imagine that if there's all of these snakes all summer long, that predators know it, and the predators know where to come. So we got to see lots of predation, which was mostly birds. That won't surprise you, of course. So lots of red-tailed hawks coming and getting snakes. And then one thing that, again, I shouldn't have been surprised. I think I was just naive, but magpies just destroying baby rattlesnakes. So the magpies up there were just coming and eating baby rattlesnakes like crazy. So that was really fun to see. And then I think my favorite thing that we saw over and over and over, was the snakes drinking. So I want to just take a moment to talk about that, if that's all right with you, because this is really cool.
Please, yeah.
If you think about like in the US, kind of where's the driest spot? Actually, I'm going to ask you, where would you say is the driest place in the US? Just don't overthink it. Just where do people say is the driest spot?
I would actually think probably southeastern California somewhere.
Right, somewhere down in a desert area. Maybe, and some people might say even like Arizona or something. But we know that Arizona gets reliable summer rains that are there. The snakes can drink when the snakes are most active. So it turns out that in like high elevation prairie, like in Colorado, most of the precipitation is actually happening through the winter in the form of snow, which is useless to these animals. And they come out and they've got a 4 or 5 month active season, and there's very few rains in the summer, and the pregnant females can't go down and drink out of any ponds or creeks or anything. They're stuck up on the hill. So there's rainwater only is all they can get. So people have known for a long time that rattlesnakes will drink rainwater off their backs, but using the camera, we were able to see some really cool stuff. So first, it's instinctive. Again, not surprising, but baby rattlesnakes, the first day they're born, are out there. As soon as it rains, they rush out, they curl up like little cinnamon rolls, flatten their bodies down, and start drinking off of themselves and each other too.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Did you ever see a snake drink off another snake? That's cool.
All the time. And in fact, my colleague Scott Boback is my collaborator on this, and one of his undergraduates, Maddie McIntyre, who's now a PhD student in Chris Anderson's lab, they did a study. We all did a study together. It was Maddie's work, showing that when there's other snakes present, they're more likely to drink off of other snakes than they are off of themselves. So just a really cool social behavior. Why? We don't know why, but the way it looks is so cool, right? They all rush out and just make themselves into little bowls and drink off of each other. And it's kind of endearing. People on social media really thought that was cute and liked it. So I realized quickly it's a good outreach tool. Showing people snakes turning into little teacups and drinking off of their backs is a way to help improve perceptions, which is, a big part of what this is about, right? We could be watching them live ourselves, collecting data, but a big part of the joy of this is all of the other people who watch, even people who are snake reluctant. And they see, this is what rattlesnakes are actually like. They're doing these really neat behaviors. The moms are taking care of the babies. They're drinking off of each other's backs. They're getting eaten by all kinds of stuff. They see the complexity and the beauty that is ecology that we all know because we've had the privilege of doing work with these animals. But other people don't. They just see BS on YouTube and TV. And so we're trying to really fight that by showing this. And some people get on there and they go, oh no, it's just, there's snakes just sitting there. And I'm like, no, it's not. Look at that snake. Look how it's a pregnant female. And do you notice that she's only got the rear end of her body sticking out into the sun? The rest of her is under the shade. So she's keeping different body temperatures so she can speed up development of her fetuses. And look how she's got the bottom part of her body kind of angled down. She's maybe hoping to get some of those fetuses to move by gravity downhill a little ways. So there's like so much you can see when you just take a look at what snakes are doing without disturbing them. Because that's the other thing, Chris. If I was to go up there and sit and watch these snakes, they get super freaked out. They don't behave naturally. But with a hidden camera, they do.
Yeah. Well, I love this because, when I give presentations and talk about the research that various people have been doing, say on parental care and rattlesnakes, it's really surprising to a lot of people that, snakes do something like that. But so anytime you can, show something like you were talking about the neonate rattlesnakes drinking water off their backs or off other snakes' backs. I mean, I just think it's great. It just like endears them to some degree to people. Not that we want to anthropomorphize everything, but a lot of people do that with animals, and so some of that will only help the snakes in the long run.
You're speaking my love language right now, Chris. I think anthropomorphizing snakes, I think, is a problem in our research, but not in our outreach. Yeah. Why not? Right? I mean, anything. And I love that the hypothesis that you just put forward, which is that showing people mother rattlesnakes caring for their babies is a good outreach thing. It might help to change their minds. That was my hypothesis too. And we tested that. And we have a paper coming out any day now in PLOS One showing that is an effective technique. That does help to improve people's minds and change their minds about rattlesnakes.
Really? That's great.
So cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did a study on it. I was like, I'm tired of just like thinking this is happening. Let's test the hypothesis. So that was actually a graduate student named Erin Allison at West Liberty University over in West Virginia, who I was on her committee and helped her out with that. She did that work, and it's a much more complicated study. It's about different outreach techniques and how that may impact people's opinions about rattlesnakes. But we actually applied our skills as scientists to that, and it was very fulfilling to be able to see for once now, like, so your hypothesis was supported, Chris. It does work.
That's great. Love to hear that. So back to the predation. So you said red-tailed hawks were one of the predators. How often, at least when you saw a hawk come into view of the camera, how often were they successful? Was it kind of like the type of thing where a red-tailed hawk could just pick off a snake anytime it wanted, or was it they had a lot of misses, or the snake somehow tried to defend itself and the hawk would abort? How did that all play out?
Okay, so I want to know the answer to that too. Bad news is we don't know it yet because these were time-lapse images, so it was every 5 minutes, and so we didn't get to see that. But the good news is that the live cam is going to answer that question. Yeah. Because starting in May, so from May through October, we're going to have 24 hours on the entire area where the snakes are. So with the exception of the snakes going underground, we're going to see everything they're doing at every moment, including every predator that comes. So we will be able to actually really go in and analyze and and look at these interactions between the predators, but not even just interactions with predators. We saw some weird stuff on the time lapse that were like, what's going on? So for example, marmots would come up there, and marmots obviously aren't predators of rattlesnakes. They're obviously also, the adults are too big for a rattlesnake to eat, but they would come up there, especially when the rattlesnakes weren't out. Like they would come at night when it was too cold, and the rattlesnakes shed at the site. So there's rattlesnake sheds everywhere. And they would like mess with the rattlesnake sheds, and they would poop all over the rattlesnake area, and they would like roll around and stuff. What are they doing? Does this have something to do with kind of like the work on California ground squirrels rubbing rattlesnake sheds all over their skin for, whether it be a social status thing, or I tangled with the rattlesnake thing, or kind of blocking their scent from rattlesnake? I don't know. But these are the kind of things we're going to get to see it live in real time too.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing.
I'm not going to get any sleep.
He's going to be watching. Are you recording, all these data too? So you're going to have endless amounts of data, or is it just something you're going to kind of watch in real time? Because I can't imagine how much space that would take. If you enjoy listening to the Snake Talk podcast, stay in the loop with the Orianne Society's latest conservation updates from the field. Read about new published research, as well as fascinating insights on the species we work with by following us on social media. Follow, like, share. Let's spread the word. Together, we can make a difference. Find the Orianne Society on Instagram, Facebook, X, or LinkedIn and be part of the conversation.
It takes a lot of space, but yes, we are. So in California over the past 3 years, the camera was not a night camera, so it was on from about 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. And so it stores those on YouTube. It stores them and archives them. So right now, anybody can just go to our YouTube channel for Project Rattlecam and go back and find the raw data. Although I do recommend looking at the highlights reels instead, because that's much more interesting. Because there's a lot of time when there's no snakes out at all. And the same thing will happen with the Colorado site. There's going to be, each day will be broken up into 12-hour intervals. So there'll be 2 files for each day, which will be a raw file that we can go back and download and look at as needed. So it is a huge amount of data, but we are in the age of big data now, and YouTube is very accommodating. It allows us to do what we need to do.
Great. So you talked about outreach, and we talked about some of the values there, but maybe, first of all, I guess talk about what's kind of the outreach plan for this live stream? Is this something that is always going to be up and available to people? Is it something that's going to be up at certain times? How are you going to get it out there to the world and, kind of maximize the positive impact you could have, on these snakes?
So that just sounded, what you just said was like word for word the speech that I gave to my graduate students last week when I was encouraging them to finalize the outreach plans. I was like, how are you going to do this? And so today I had a meeting with one of them, and we went over, so we have various levels of planning, and some of them are still in development. But for example, there's going to be a Google form where people are encouraged to submit observations of interesting behaviors or things like that. We have a heavy social media presence so that people can learn about us. We will have press releases. We certainly know how to get free publicity because of people. News outlets love to publish stuff about snakes because they get attention. Did you know that, by the way? That all these news journalists I talk to, they say that the metrics on the articles they publish about snakes, way more people look at it than anything else. Isn't that crazy? Yep. Like people love to hate snakes, one or the other. Mm-hmm. Nobody's ambivalent.
Yep, exactly.
So
everybody has an emotion. It's might be anger or excitement, but nobody's just like indifferent. They're not like snake.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody cares a little bit. So yeah, we have a multifaceted plan for how to do this. The other thing that's really important is that my graduate student Owen has been working really hard to get Project Rattlecam into zoos, museums, and schools. So a number of zoos are going to be live streaming Project Rattlecam next to their rattlesnake exhibits, so people can see the captive snakes up close, and then also be watching what live rattlesnakes are doing. And then Owen, along with my other graduate student Max, are going to be, they're working right now on this really cool project called Rattle Ed, which is a fourth grade science unit where students in fourth grade classes will have a notebook and a bunch of assignments in it. And in class, they'll be watching the rattlesnake camera. They'll design the kind of data they want to collect from it, ask their questions, and really get involved in that and do projects, learning the scientific method. It's all informed by next generation science standards. We worked with a lot of pre-teachers at Cal Poly to develop this, which is really cool. And it has built-in assessment where the students draw a picture of a rattlesnake before doing all this and then after. And we're working on using those pictures they drew and like a little essay that they write about them to be able to assess what the student thinks about rattlesnakes and see whether participating in this improved their perception of rattlesnakes, all kinds of stuff like that. So there's a lot going on in terms of our desire to get this out in places where people can watch it. So what I always tell people, and of course I give talks everywhere. I just got back from South Dakota. I'm on my way to Tucson. I'm talking to you today. I'll talk about rattlesnakes to anyone who will listen. And I always tell people, you know that monitor that you have in your office that you look at spreadsheets and stuff on? Well, put the rattlesnake camera on the side all day long so that you could just have it on in the background and watch what the snakes are doing because it's really cool.
Yeah, it's an interesting project. So when will it be online officially? Do you know, or do you have a
I'm going out there I'm going out there the last week of April, which goes, I think it ends on like May 2nd or something. So our hope is that it will go live by early May, and people can go onto rattlecam.org to check it out, or any of our social medias. We're at Rattlecams on X, Instagram, and Facebook. And we'll, of course, announce that when it goes live. So if it's not on in early May, it's because we've had some technical difficulties and it would be on shortly thereafter. And then the California one will be on again. That one will start up probably in July.
I may have missed it, but did you say how you're powering the camera?
I didn't say. I didn't say. Yeah, it's such a challenge, Chris, the powering and the streaming. So yeah, it's solar powered, and we have batteries. And the batteries are extremely fancy batteries that can withstand being frozen solid in Steamboat Springs winter and still put themselves back up, so to speak, the following spring. The solar panels are 8 by 16 feet, which is crazy. And that's so that we can have enough, basically enough solar power and then storage so that if there was like a 3-day long storm, we would have enough stored power for that. And the whole thing is all custom built by engineers here. We have a design and fabrication facility at Cal Poly where I've worked with these guys for many years now. And this year we really juiced it up to be able to get this one going. This is not a kit thing. This is really hard. And it is all done via streaming. So we have a strong Verizon signal out there. So we stream it. And then there's a app called Cam Streamer that we use to be able to stream it live to YouTube and have these interactions. So other people before us with the bird world figured all this out, but it was us who figured out how to do the remote powering and the remote cell streaming, which sounds easy now, but it was not easy. Yeah. So, and it's just so epic too. It even has an alarm system. So if like a bear walks in front of the camera in the middle of the night, it's going to ping me on my cell phone so that I'll know, and I can turn on the camera and see. It's just so good. It's so
you're going to get sleep. No sleep.
No, I'm not. I know. I already told my husband, I said, I needed him to mount, and he is. He's mounting a computer screen next to our TV so that I can watch the camera all the time when we're watching TV at night. Otherwise, I'll just be in my office. I mean, it's like one or the other. But yeah, the place, it's a really amazing piece of machinery now. And I should say, too, that we have a couple like tiny grants for it, but it's not really grant funded. It was donor funded. So we've had over 350 individual donors who've made this happen because it's expensive to get this whole camera thing going and to pay for the labor to go into it. So I'm really proud of that because I feel like this project is really for people, right? And so it's funded by people as well. This is not just someone's little science project like I've done with a lot of my past work. This is like big time, and it's for people, by people. People powered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So are you already thinking of future applications of this technology in other places or species or systems you work in, or you're just focused at the moment?
Well, right now I'm focused on the Colorado thing because it's coming right up, and like I said, I think I have 2 more trips even before then because this is my busy time of year. Spring, herping season. But I would love your input on this. So a couple of years ago when I was daydreaming about this, thinking big picture, I was like, all right, what other reptile congregations would be really cool to have a live stream? And I thought of a few, like on some of the Great Lakes, some of the Nerodia, some of the water snakes could be really cool to watch those on some of the places where they gather on the shores. But then it really made me think, I said, you know what? Reptile congregations are not that common, really. There's not a lot of them that are in one spot and stays in that one spot.
Yeah.
Like there's not a lot of denning snakes outside of rattlesnakes. There's not a lot.
Yeah, obviously the garter snakes up in Canada would be one. I'm sure you've thought of that. Not snakes,
so cool.
but we work in Africa in the Seychelles on giant tortoises, on Aldabra tortoises, and they use these tortoise turfs, they call them. So there's certain places that they use quite a bit, something like that. Might need to be a little more wide angle, but that'd be interesting. One of the greatest wildlife spectacles in the world are these, caiman down in South America, and I don't know how the setup would be for that, but that's quite a gathering of reptiles. So
that would be so cool. I was just in Ecuador last week and I got to see some caiman, although I wasn't in a giant gathering. We saw maybe like 10 of them or something. Yeah. But exactly. I mean, these are the kind of things that would be so cool. It'd be great we really need to diversify these wildlife cams. Feathers and fur is not diversity. We need to add scales to the mix, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I could point you to some spots in South America where there's, at any given place, and you look around, there's hundreds of caiman, hundreds of capybara, just pretty amazing things. But
oh my God, that'd be so cool. All right, well, that's next. That's next.
Great. So this hopefully will be live in early or let's just say in May. And so remind people, if they do want to go on YouTube and find it, where would they find it?
Easiest thing to do is to go to our website, rattlecam.org, because that will have on the homepage, it'll have the streams ongoing. So you'll have the Colorado stream that starts in May, and whatever the current day's stream will be the one showing on rattlecam.org. And then that will connect you to the YouTube. So if you do want to go back and subscribe to us and look at highlights, etc., they can do that. They can also follow along on social media so that they can be apprised of interesting things happening in real time. If they're not like me and they don't want to be watching it 24 hours a day, if they want to just go over there where there's something happening that's really cool, then they can follow us on social media and just pop over when they see me post something.
Okay, great. Well, I've already mentioned in the intro that you are in the Snake Talk Storytelling Hall of Fame. But as you know, I have all my guests tell me their best snake story. But since we've already heard your best, wondering if you could share with us your next best snake story.
Oh God, my next best snake story. This is so hard because there's so many, right? I'm always like, what would people most like to hear right now? Okay, well, Chris, wait, you probably don't remember which one I told the first time, right? I can't remember.
You talked
There's so many. I'm trying to think.
You talked about the snake that was killed and
oh yeah,
the response to that.
Oh, that was a good story.
Yeah.
That was a good story. Okay, all right. Well, here's another one. So when Scott Boback took me out to show me the big mega den in Colorado, you can walk up there and all the snakes see you and they all immediately just dive down the holes. They're super scared. They like a log jam. It's hilarious because they're trying to get on the same hole and it's like, you gotta get down. And we were catching them, we were doing all this stuff, but then I started to be like, I want to watch them. So I just, at one point, sat down and I sat there and the snakes slowly started to come back out. And they would come out and they would see that I was there. They recognized me as like not supposed to be there. So they would give me the kind of, side eye, that suspicious look that they give, which is really just how their face looks. But they're looking at you that way. They're like suspicious. And then I just was stock still. And so they slowly started to come back out. And then rattlesnakes, of course, turns out that they, if they don't see movement, they just forget that you're not supposed to be there. And you become part of the landscape. So those rattlesnakes all started coming out, and by the dozens, they came out, and they all just went out and curled up where they were before, all around me. Just all around me is this ocean of rattlesnakes right next to me. And I got to see how it all went down. I got to see how, this big male would come out, and then a little baby rattlesnake would come up and like curl up right on top of them and like, yawn to stretch its little jaws out. And I got to see all of them just peacefully coming out and curling up, and because they didn't recognize me as a foe. And I didn't want to move because it would scare them again, because it would be like me bursting out of the landscape at them. And so I sat there with my legs completely asleep for like 2 hours. The sun finally started to go down, and it was time for the snakes to go down too. So I got up. They were a little scared, but just being able to sit there and watch those peaceful snakes all around me and feel like part of the landscape for them was really a privilege. It was one of the coolest experiences of my life. It was almost kind of like you have to be there one to see it, but it was so great, and not a single rattle, not a single nothing, just peaceful, curled up critters.
Yeah, I love that story. That sounds amazing. Would love to go there, but can see it on the live stream at least soon, so I'm excited for that.
That's right.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming back on, and appreciate you taking the time today.
You're so welcome, and thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I appreciate all your listeners and all that you and Orianne does for snakes and for wildlife. And so thank you so much.
Great. And so I want to tell the audience, first of all, make sure you go out and get this new book on snakes in California. And then wanted to remind everybody that snakes are animals too. And it's a privilege to see one in the wild.